The next two ones are both from Russia. The first one is from Alexander Nagorny, deputy editor of the Russian weekly newspaper Zavtra. And he's asking, my question is, what might be the time frame and the parameters of inflation in the United States and Europe? What should be the political consequences of this for the international community and the world community? So the question is the time frame into hyperinflation. The second one concerning Glass-Steagall. And the second one is from Mikhail Kazin, Russian economist, who is also a frequent commenter on Channel 1 TV and The Voice of Russia. I have the following question. Well over a decade has passed since Clinton bowed to the request of his friends and abolished the Glass-Steagall law. During that interval of time, the sheer volume of world finances has really mushroomed, and if similar laws were to be reintroduced now, the entire world financial system could collapse. In the view of the LaRouche school, what can be done about this?
Well, as I already mentioned, the ESM, even if it would go into effect, which is still held up by some legal suits, and there are a flood of new legal suits being prepared also against the EZB, but if it would go into effect, the ESM as it is conceived right now is already too small. Because if you need to have so-called rescue packages for Spain, then Italy would follow, then you soon are at the French banks. And one of the reasons why the French are making such enormous pressure on Germany to go for all of these schemes is because the French banks are about the most bankrupt of all. So in order to refinance this, you would go into a hyperinflationary process probably in the next weeks and months. Inflation is already visible in the form of commodity prices, real estate, gasoline, energy, but basically you could have a complete explosion like it happened in 1923, because if you remember, in 1923 you already had almost 4 years of money printing on the side of the Reichsbank, because the Versailles conditions imposed on Germany meant that Germany had to print more money than the German economy could possibly compensate for. But only after the French troops had occupied the Rhineland and production came to a standstill as a result of the opposition of the German population, only then, from spring to November 1923, it exploded. Today we have a similar process, not in one country, but we have it in the entire Eurozone and in all of the dollar zone. So therefore, this could go much quicker. And since the dollar is not just a currency for the United States, it would affect naturally every country and would lead to a general collapse and outbreak of chaos. Now, what would be the social consequences if people realize that hyperinflation is on? Well, the EU and even the British government, they have made contingency plan for the evacuation of British citizens, if there would be such a collapse. So it's short term. I cannot tell you exactly how many weeks, but it's already on. The hyperinflation is on. Bankers like Deutsche Bank bankers and others are already saying, yeah, there will be a rather big inflation, but that is the price we have to pay. Others even peddle the line that inflation would be good because it would reduce the debt. Now this is expropriation of the population, and therefore it would just, it would not eliminate the dangers of war and general collapse. Now concerning Glass-Steagall, well, that is absolutely true. If you impose Glass-Steagall right now in the United States and in Europe, you would wipe out a large part of this virtual money which has been created through derivatives, through structured papers, through securitization, through all these creative financial instruments which were the result of the deregulation already under Greenspan in the 90s, but especially after the repeal of Glass-Steagall in 1999. You would have to write off most of this paper. And as the former economic minister of Italy, Tremonti, has pointed out, people would not really lose anything because they would only write off something which existed only virtually before. So people naturally are opposed to this because they say, but I have all these structured papers and I have this and that. But it does not exist. It does not have a real value in terms of the real economy. So therefore, when you impose Glass-Steagall and you protect the commercial banks, you have not enough credit. You have not enough money, not enough liquidity. And this is why you have to combine Glass-Steagall with the concept of national banking, of Alexander Hamilton, of, as I said, Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau, principles after the Second World War in Germany. And you have to have a credit system where the sovereign power of the state to issue credit for the common good towards future production, for productive investment, that has to be put on the agenda. Now, this is, I know, a big problem because people who have been thinking in Europe and elsewhere in terms of monetarist categories, they have a real mental block to understand that. They somehow cannot make the jump. They say, yeah, but if you issue credit, then that is inflationary. Or where is the difference between what the central banks are doing now and your credit system? Now, the difference is absolutely fundamental because, as I mentioned, the liquidity published right now is entirely for past accumulation of debt, outstanding derivatives, outstanding accumulation of things from the past. If a sovereign state says, I have the following manpower, with the following investments in well-defined programs and projects of physical economy, I will cause productive full employment. Productive full employment means an increase in the productivity of the labor force and the industrial capacity by applying the newest results of scientific progress and the principles of increase of energy flux density in the production process. Because you want to increase the productivity by making investments in those areas which are necessary for the long-term survivability of civilization, and that does require an increase in energy flux density. Now, if you obey these principles of physical economy, then a credit is not inflationary because you issue that credit with a low interest rate and you don't expect a return after a month, not like Ackermann wanted to have 25% returns. You have to say goodbye to that idea. You issue the credit for 10 years, for 20 years, as long as it is needed to fulfill the project you have designed. Now, if you have international cooperation among nations, let's say for the World Land Bridge, then you make multinational long-term credit arrangements among all participating countries, and you also balance the differences among the countries. Like, for example, some countries are very huge, like Russia, many time zones, relatively few people as a population. Then you have other countries, very small, many people, like Belgium. Then you have other countries who have monocultures, others have, so you have a diversity of conditions, and you have to have a network of multinational treaty arrangements where the aim is to increase the productivity of the labor force of the respective populations, and then you increase the buying power over a long period of time, and you change the entire way how people think about that. Now, I would say that we need this debate in all countries. In Germany, we have the president of the reconstruction of the post-war period, where the Marshall Plan, so-called, was being implemented by the Kreditanstalt according to these principles. Roosevelt did it with the New Deal. And I think in Russia, I know that there is a very competent economist who has written about that, Sergei Glaziev, that the state has the right to issue credit towards production, and that is what is the sovereign right of a nation. Now, therefore, when you want to realize these large projects, I think it would be a complete mistake to think that you need foreign investment of some offshore bankers to invest in this, but it must be the sovereign power of the government and of the state to do these investments for the common good. Now, if that is being done, there would be naturally a period where, you know, a certain change would have to occur. And the population probably would be anxious of what that means, like currency reserves in Germany has a very bad name. But I think that right now the much, much bigger danger is what we are facing through the combination of war going out of control in the Middle East and hyperinflation. Because if you have more or less global hyperinflation, you have social chaos beyond belief. If, on the other side, the responsible governments of the world work together and say, we have a plan how we get the mankind out of this mess, here is what we are going to do, then I think, you know, it can be done, and the people who have by now, at least in Western Europe, this is the case, and I think in the United States as well, lost a lot of trust in their governments. And that is a very dangerous condition as it is, because if you have a complete divide between the mass of the population and their governments, this also forebodes big dangers for the future. So I think we should have an international debate, public conferences, TV programs presenting these ideas, and get the population very rapidly accustomed to the idea that we do have an alternative. Because all of this talk about there is no alternative is just totally ridiculous and irresponsible, because it is the creativity of men always to be able to come up with alternatives. And, you know, there is only one thing which has no alternative, and that is death. Everything else has an alternative. So let's just be human and implement them before it's too late.